Friends, the new trailer is here, and after controlling the rollout for the upcoming Spider-Man, brand new day from start to finish. These last 2 weeks have probably been the worst for the Sony teams, who have had as many leaks as the Titanic did at its peak. Yes, in just a few days, we saw absolutely everything come out, little by little, until there were even rumors of films being available for sale on the black market. It's completely crazy. By the way, just a little disclaimer. If it turns out to be true, don't go watch it, guys. Don't ruin your theater experience. No matter what, on our side, we waited for the official trailer release. And man, it's even better than the first one. We've got everything. Finally, Hulk reveals himself. No, explodes into the form that all the fans were waiting for. Jean Grey shows us the extent of her powers, and Peter evolves into an unstoppable monster. And yes, whether it was the various leaks or this trailer, I didn't let a single detail slip by me. And together, we're going to go over all the clues that make me say the real villain of this movie isn't Scorpion or the Punisher or even Hulk, but Peter himself. And I have a feeling that things aren't going to end very well for the friendly neighborhood spider. That's why, my friends, we're entering the spoiler zone, the zone of all dangers. You're with Kevin Bucott, your favorite theorist's favorite theorist. Roll the intro. The monster in you? Well, this week, unlike usual, I don't want to beat around the bush to tell you exactly what I think. This movie has remained a mystery to viewers for months. Going from a multiverse movie to street level, from Chatra to The Big Myth to Mr. Negative, it's a film that has evolved a lot and at least until last week managed to keep all its secrets. But Tom Holland said it himself. What saved the movie was working on Odyssey with Christopher Nolan. Used to Marvel sets, where the film is organic and can change every day, Holland no longer wants to work like that and has put a real structure in place. For him, you have to understand the why. Why did we want to make this movie? Sure, the franchise brings in a lot of money, almost effortlessly. But now, Tom wanted to do things right. He was influenced by Nolan's preparation, where during filming, everyone knew exactly what they were doing and there was no room for improvisation. And that's why he asked Tom Rothman, the CEO of Sony Pictures, to postpone the film by 6 months to rewrite everything and prepare everything. Those 6 months let Sony hire Destin Daniel Cretton, who was now available. Anyway, the reason I'm telling you this is because the mess we've heard about since the announcement of Spider-Man 4 is partly explained by this. Sony wanted to bring back John Watts and had a pretty clear idea of what they wanted to do. Make money by making a multiverse movie, basically a copy of No Way Home.
No! God, please, no! No!
But I think Tom Holland came in, put his two big web balls on the table and said, no way. He even admitted that his statement in 2022, if I'm still playing Spider-Man at 30, it means I've failed. That was actually a negotiation strategy to be more involved in the creative process. And now he'll play Spider-Man as long as it takes. In any case, until he passes the torch to a younger actor, probably Miles Morales. Anyway, Peter came up with an idea. Spider Puberty, a term that would refer to the coming of age, to the hero's difficult adolescence. So, it's a metaphor. Obviously, it's more about the awkwardness that this period leaves on the body and mind. And that's exactly what was initially rejected by Sony's executives before finally becoming central.
Premature ejaculation is a medical issue that affects 1 in 3 men.
And you'll understand it throughout this video. We're probably going through, without really realizing it yet, a renaissance arc in the MCU. The Russos actually admit it in The Hollywood Reporter. With the next 2 Avengers movies, they're going back to phase 0. The universe is starting over with a new foundation. And it's a trend we see in the names of the latest movies and series. Brave New World, Thunderbolt, New Avengers, Fantastic Four First Step, and now Spider-Man Brand New Day. That's a lot of new things, even a sense of renewal. These 4 movies are reshuffling the deck. Captain America 4, as bad as it may be, serves to reposition and legitimize Sam's place as Captain. It only moves one story forward. It sidelines Ross and says, enough with the nonsense, Captain is Sam now. Thunderbolt, on the other hand, will probably redefine how villains will intervene in the future. Up until now, every villain had an intimate, almost inextricable connection with the hero or heroes of the film. It was still very often personal. Thunderbolt now explains to us that villains can be created and used, nothing personal, not always with a specific goal. The villain is now part of the ecosystem. He appears like the hero, but without having to be connected to him, and that's relatively new. The Fantastic Four are a first step toward the new MCU, the one of tomorrow that includes IPs from another studio. We're no longer grounded in reality. The movie dares to use the fantastic as a new reference point. Finally, Brand New Day seems to be the final cornerstone, and not just a little, because I feel like this movie is a launching pad. None of the villains we see in the trailer really seem to be the main villain. Scorpion, the Hand, Hulk, the God of Odyssey, probably Tombstone, are just threats that are being revealed to the world for future projects. Here, the movie isn't about a hero against one or more villains, but about a hero facing himself, his own evolution, his dark side. Yes, we're getting there, to this spider puberty. Because looking closer, Peter appears to be mutating, likely gaining organic webs and more. He also seems to be developing a sort of second personality, much more powerful and darker. A force he has always held back because it's extremely dangerous, now unleashed. Doesn't that remind you of something? Yes, Banner isn't in this movie for no reason. He too has spent his life restraining brute force. And in this trailer, when Peter asks him how to sort out the good and bad sides of his evolution, Banner himself wonders how to judge the good from the bad in nature. Which is funny because that's exactly what he's done his whole life, and he created a huge imbalance within himself. But they're not the only ones, since now we're 90% sure that Sadie Sink is playing the character of Jean Grey, or at least a telepath, who almost seems to be the villain of this movie. I said almost because Brian Nunes is going to show her to us as a mutant who, in the 616, was not taken in by Charles Xavier as a child, and so she didn't have that mental shield to protect her from her traumas. As a reminder, in most adaptations, the Phoenix only becomes central to Jean's psyche after this barrier breaks, eventually consuming her and turning her into the Dark Phoenix. So it's possible that she too is hiding some kind of monstrous double. Amid all this is Frank Castle, seen as the most deranged, yet he's the only one who has accepted and lives with his demons. So it sounds strange, but he's actually the most balanced of the four today, which I think is the movie's main theme. Each character goes through an evolution, each character will try to contain the monster that lies within them and will learn to manage it before maybe integrating it, but not all of them will necessarily succeed, and that's where the movie becomes divisive. Well, I promised you we'd get straight to the point, but actually, I'm lying to myself, to my inner monster. I talk, I get carried away. Anyway, it's really time to get to this trailer, Spider Puberty. While still remaining relatively mysterious, all the elements we have now allow us to see much more clearly how Peter evolves in the movie. The story starts at the end of No Way Home, or just before the last scene, as Peter follows an Instagram story from MJ and Ned about getting into MIT. Now, we know that after the events of the third film, they were able to get directly into the prestigious university. This is where Peter moved into a new apartment and where he sews his suits himself. We already knew this, but the film's opening will show a time-lapse of his evolution as Spider-Man, battling increasingly sophisticated villains. Thanks to his experience with Stark, his suit will also evolve from battle to battle. In the first trailer, it was hard to tell if, after all these years, he was still in that same apartment. Now we see that he seems to be in a much bigger loft, but also slightly run down. Maybe in an abandoned area, away from prying eyes. The scripts that had been shared, with handwritten notes from the actors, told us that Peter had developed a new AI, being, to quote Tom himself, the closest thing he has to a friend. The scripts also indicate that he would have developed a boosted 3D printer capable of creating his gadgets, like his web shooters, for example. But that's not all, because in this shot, we see that Peter seems to be coming out of an alley where a web explosion took place. Well, the work-in-progress leaks of the trailers tell us that it's the explosion of a spider grenade. Yes, it's written here in tiny letters. He already had this accessory in the suit Stark designed, though it looks like he still needs to improve it here. And that's not the only change, because one of the first shots in this new trailer confirms that his web shooters won't really be useful to him anymore. Yeah, it's clear now, it's final, and anyway, it's confirmed in one of the many synopses. Peter now has organic webs. But let's try to understand what's really happening inside Peter's body. We see that he goes to see Professor Banner to get his help, asking him how he managed to remove the mutations from his DNA, but the truth is, once again, Peter doesn't learn anything. Because he doesn't just ask Banner to help him reverse this evolution, to cure him. No, once again, he comes to ask an Avenger to do the impossible. Yes, this situation can only remind us of No Way Home. He wants to get rid of the bad aspects without sacrificing what suits him, not that things went so well last time. Since we see that these new webs seem infinitely more powerful than his synthetic webs, we'll see him able to hold back a Hulk or break the blades of the Hand. But above all, in his learning, he can't swing at all anymore. But that's not all. This transformation seems to push his abilities to the extreme. In the first trailer, we see Peter holding his head. So, we might have thought it was the consequences of an intervention by this mysterious telepath, but here we learn that he's immune to her powers, and we'll talk about that again in a moment. So there's a good chance that his spider sense is also greatly affected. And as I mentioned, this movie will focus on accepting his inner monster. Peter has completely forgotten himself over the years, letting the spider take over. Just like Batman, the costume becomes the real face. He is Spider-Man, and Peter is now just his alter ego, so the spider takes over. And the further we go, the more this movie seems to draw inspiration from many comic runs, especially those related to the numerous characters present. But one thing remains constant: transformation. And for that, the main inspiration seems more and more to be the run The Other. I've already told you about it, but let's go a bit deeper. In Spider-Man, The Other by Straczynski, Peter sees his powers evolve. First, they start to fail. In a routine fight, Peter is no longer able to dodge bullets. He becomes more violent, he has visions, and later he learns that he is dying and no one can save him. Not Reed, not Wakanda, not even Strange's magic. And it's his multiversal adversary, Morlun, the Spider Totem Hunter, who takes advantage of it. Weakened, Peter gets massacred. But it's at the hospital that everything changes. While MJ is at his bedside, Morlun takes the opportunity to finish what he started and attacks MJ. Peter then comes out of his coma in a monstrous form with bloodshot eyes, sharp teeth, and stingers coming straight out of his wrists. This time, it's this other side that gets the upper hand over Morlun, even going so far as to bite him in the throat in a beastly rage. It's a fight that weakens Peter, who dies in MJ's arms. But the next day, only an empty body is found at the morgue. Like a spider, he has molted and left his physical shell behind. He continues his transformation in a cocoon under a bridge. And as the first trailer indicates, with this voice that's hard to identify for now, spiders have 3 stages of evolution. First, there's the egg and the birth, then the little spider, the stage where it evolves, learns, goes through molts, and finally the last molt, the transition to adulthood. And as the voice says, it's between these stages that they are most vulnerable. Peter is going through his transition to adulthood here, after many molts since his hatching, a painful, dangerous transition. Because in The Other, Peter is reborn with new abilities. He can now create his own organic webs, but that's not all. He adopts all the abilities of a new adult spider. He has night vision, stingers on each wrist, and he's able to sense the vibrations of his webs. His grip has also increased. Now his entire body sticks, not just his fingers and feet. We see this in the trailer when pigeons stick to him as he swings. A molting that completely regenerates his body and heals him from all his previous injuries. He's a new man, a new spider, but the most interesting aspect of this mutation from the comics is his psychological evolution. Peter has always operated out of guilt, but also in imbalance. He is a man in his civilian life and a spider when he puts on the costume, and one often got in the way of the other. After his molting, Peter finally accepts this balance. He is both at the same time. His spider sense is no longer just a simple radar, it becomes more organic, and we understand that the other is not a separate entity, but actually his spider side. The part he has always rejected out of fear that it would take over and make him lose control. The fear of all Spider-Men, letting anger take over would be irreparable. But in the MCU, Peter, despite everything that has happened to him, is not yet capable of compromise or balance. He is in constant struggle. And yes, he has now forgotten the man within him. Until what he has always repressed takes over. Because the leaks showed us 2 different trailer introductions with the same effect, the switch. In the other version of the trailer, he spins an extraordinary web to face the hand. Here, we see that the other side takes over Peter when he needs it most. His eyes turn black and he no longer holds back, violently throwing the Scorpion onto a police car. Yes, he becomes what he always tried to avoid. But this time, Andrew and Toby, 2 characters who greatly inspired his new choices and his costume, are no longer there to warn him. Peter loses his sense of balance and sinks into the other side, the beast, the spider. He says it himself, he's out of control. But let's talk a bit about the others. Exactly. A brand new day. Most of the criticism around the Spider-Man movies in the MCU has always been the same. Peter is constantly under the guidance of a powerful MCU character. It all started with Stark, his mentor, then with Nick Fury, well, almost. And finally through Doctor Strange. But here, I don't think the presence of Bruce Banner or even Frank Castle has anything to do with this idea of mentorship. The MCU is now complete, and they clearly intend to take advantage of that. I think the era of solo movies where a hero fights a mirror villain is over. Kevin Feige has always dreamed of this, and now he can do it. The Secret Wars press will have started. Common. Every hero now lives in a shared universe where their actions will collide with those of other heroes, and that's a good thing. We were all extremely frustrated to see Sam having to deal with a Red Hulk on his own. It made no sense. And as I told you at the beginning of the video, we are in the age of all things new. The new MCU has already begun, and this Spider-Man leads us directly into this new doctrine. Sure, Peter is going to ask Bruce for help, but obviously it's more this movie that's going to help us get back the Hulk we've been waiting for 10 years than the other way around. But it's interesting to understand why Marvel chose to introduce these three other characters in Peter's wake. Because where exactly is Professor Banner now? We last saw him in the She-Hulk series, which you know I love. No, it's crap, especially in how it handled Hulk. But what do we learn from it? Well, basically, not only was he able to tame the wild Hulk to become Smart Hulk since Endgame, but now, thanks to his device on his wrist, he can also turn back into a human. Crucial for withstanding FX impacts. For Hulk, that's the sole purpose. We also know that he went back to his planet to look for his son Scar without anything ever being explained. And I'm telling you, don't expect any answers here because Brave New Day is, for me, the transition film for all of its characters. And there's no way Feige is going to come back and explain the mess that's been going on these past few years. The Russos have even said that the Avengers movies will be a reset of the universe. Not that what happened before never existed, no, but we're just never going to talk about it again. Simply put, it's to have a fresh entry point for the people who dropped out and for new viewers. So Hulk will probably just be one challenge among many in this movie. There have been so many rumors and reports about this film that we often end up forgetting them. Alex Perez said this movie would be a modern take on the 12 Labors of Hercules. A series of events that Peter will have to face in just 1 week, the worst week of his life, in order to grow. Banner will therefore become the real Hulk again. So how? First, through his inhibitor, as Banner hints with his usual little running gag. And this inhibitor, we see later that Peter finds it broken and his transformation into Savage Hulk begins. However, in his Smart Hulk form, he never wore this technology. It's there, as explained in She-Hulk, only to make him take his human form. His DNA was modified in his lab in Mexico, so that his transformation would only be into Smart Hulk. Which brings us back to his line, how would you decide what parts of nature are good or bad? Clearly, a line that goes against everything he did to distance himself from his alter ego, and that's where John Gray comes in. Daniel Harpica recently announced that he was 100% confirming that the character from his drawing was the telepathic mutant, not Chathra, not Rachel Summers, no, Jean Grey. Who told you that before? I don't remember. But it has to be said, it's a secret that's been kept for a very long time, since even on set, no one had the information. And it seems that she remains a secret almost throughout the entire movie until a final scene where she finally gives her first name, Jean. For me, it always seemed obvious that it was this character. But many of you can't imagine that one of the X-Men could be introduced in this movie. However, as I told you, Brian Uday is the bridge to this new MCU. Which comes back. Peter evolves, and the X-Men are introduced by Jean to lead to Secret Wars, where she and Peter will have a major role. It's as simple as that. And now, the new trailer leaves little room for doubt. While in the first one, we only got a brief glimpse of the character, now we have a demonstration of her powers. The psychic explosion occurs on a reimagined Roosevelt Island, likely the site of God's headquarters. While she seemed only able to move from one mind to another in the first trailer, she now appears capable, just like in the comics, of freezing half the city. Likely in a crisis, she can't control herself. According to the God here, she is an invisible force. However, there's a good chance that they're the ones who kept her secret for so long. As I said, we likely won't have the Jean Grey we're familiar with here. Mutants aren't publicly known. Worse, few seem to have truly gained their powers, or at least have only recently acquired them. We know that Wanda and Pietro had their abilities amplified by contact with the Mind Stone, that Namor is the very first mutant born from vibranium energy, and that Kamala had hers activated by quantum bracelets. All of them have powers from cosmic energies from another world, but the God here has become more aware of these mutations recently. Even worse, he hunts them. And as you know, there's a theory that mutations were activated on a large scale through the 3 successive snaps, and the considerable cosmic energy released by the stones. But let's focus on this Jean Grey. So she isn't the young mutant responsible for her parents' death, taken in by Charles Xavier. Charles Xavier himself, as I mentioned, will guide, train, and protect her from trauma with a mental block. Here, she is on her own with considerable powers. So, is she the villain of the movie? Probably not, but she is definitely the underlying threat. The first leaked teaser version included this line.
Stay out of my way, or else it won't just be your friends who don't remember who your partner is.
She threatens Peter to erase his own memory, but above all, she knows his secret, and in this trailer, she is even more threatening. In the street, she takes control of passers-by and asks Peter if he was able to get rid of the monster inside him. But on top of that, she adds, "Think I might go see how MJ's doing." She makes Peter reveal himself and put MJ in safety. Another sentence caught my attention. During the psychic explosion, we hear someone tell Spider-Man that he's the only one immune, the only one who can feel it. And I racked my brain trying to understand why Peter in particular would be immune. And actually, it's pretty clear. Strange's spell. Yes, Brand New Day follows No Way Home. And what sets him apart from the others is that he's the only one in the world who remembers who he is. In other words, Strange made it so that he's the only one immune to his own spell. He likely has magical protection that makes him immune to mind control, which is clever. Because not only does it protect him from his D-die-sync, but also probably from the collective amnesia that will happen in Secret Wars. That's the thing. So she's able to read his thoughts, but can't control him. Thank goodness. But that's not the case for everyone. Not for Banner. And that's likely how she'll unleash the monster. It's her only way to regain freedom from the D, from the gods here, who are ultimately the main threat to our characters. For some time now, the organization created by Tony Stark to clean up the Avengers' messes has sided with the government. As with most of Stark's assets, it could be with Valentina, director of the CIA and OCSE. We're not exploring that today. There's already plenty to discuss. Damage Control is now in charge of tracking down all the supers considered dangerous, making them disappear. They've already gone after Peter in the past, before he was cleared by Matt Murdock. And now, he's hunting mutants with his D distinction in mind. So, the character of Tramel Tremeltonman is once again a character introduced here. And he could be crucial for the future. Why introduce the X-Men in a Spider-Man? Well, because at the same time, they're also introducing one of their villains. Yes, he plays William Messenger. In the comics, he is the leader of an anti-mutant militia, and here, he takes the lead of the DOZO here, which will surely turn into an anti-mutant organization in the future. The actor's contract is already a multi-film deal and will see the star of Severance stay for the long term during the Mutants saga. On top of all that, we add the Hand, obviously still present, and which is going to meet a happy Peter. Yes, we're introducing yet another concept that will continue elsewhere. Most likely in Season 3 of Daredevil Born Again, which sees the return of their greatest enemy, Iron Fist. Not to mention the Scorpion, who took quite a beating from Peter, and Tombstone, who hasn't appeared yet, but seems set to join Marvel's street-level adventures. As I was saying, this movie is truly a launching pad. A brand new day. And it's not over, because Peter isn't just going to do new things, he's also going to bring back people dear to his actor, Tom Holland's loved ones, Tom and his crew. We all thought, myself included, that Peter was going to grow, move away from MJ to find a new love interest. It made sense since Zendaya said in the press she no longer wanted to mix her professional and personal life or constantly show their relationship on screen. Yet, even though MJ seemed to only appear at the beginning and was just a sign of Peter coming of age, she actually turns out to be much more important. First of all, in the photos released in Empire magazine, we see that it's Spider-Man, not Peter, who developed the famous Gamma web shooters based on Banner's bracelet technology. That information really surprised me at the time, but this trailer takes her return to a whole new level. Just when he thought he could leave his old life behind, he runs into his old buddy Ned again. He follows him home and discovers that he's obsessed with Spidey's secret identity. That's definitely going to plant a persistent idea in Peter's mind. What if the spell didn't completely work? What if deep down something still existed for Peter? And that's how MJ comes back into his life, back into his mind. Because there's still a chance to win her back. Except this time, MJ isn't alone anymore. She's no longer the weird, friendless teenager. She's with people and in a relationship. But when Jean threatens her, Spidey intervenes. You see him get her and take her to Frank, where things get interesting. Why is Frank Castle in this movie? For me, that's the real question of Spider-Man 4. He doesn't seem to be his enemy, nor his mentor, but rather his connection to reality. The Punisher has always represented violence up until now, but especially for our heroes, he's the embodiment of the harshest truth. Sure, it's tinged with brutal utilitarianism, but he's the marker that forces self-reflection. But if John Bernthal is in this movie, it's not just for that. He and Tom have been very good friends for years. They met on the set of Last Crusade in 2015 and they hit it off right away. John acted alongside Tom for his audition tape for the role of Peter, even advising him to make a film to impress Marvel. And Tom, in return, supported John through every step of his audition for the role of Punisher. And recently, they even reunited on the set of Christopher Nolan's upcoming Odyssey. And so it was only natural that Tom suggested to John to bring back his character in the MCU in a more mainstream film while still respecting the essence of the Punisher. But while everyone seems to be making a comeback for the sequel, does the Punisher's presence in this film necessarily mean a grand return for the character? Because as we've seen, his speech show allowed Frank to realize that he can offer more than just vengeance, that he can protect more than he destroys, and that's what he's going to do in this film. I think Frank will be the one to guide Peter through this ordeal, to help him understand that there can be no growth without sacrifice, something he himself learned through pain. Peter will have to accept who he is as a whole, both the man and the spider. But I also think this is where Zendaya will have a role, because I'm still convinced that she is not Peter's future. However, it was impossible for him to grieve after the events of No Way Home. These responsibilities were forced upon him, and this lack of choice led him to forget himself, to fade away, and brought him to the events of Brand New Day. That's actually what answers the question of who the villain is. Well, it's Peter himself. He is his own enemy. But Frank will make him understand. From now on, he has to choose. He has to make the sacrifice deliberately. And that's what the movie is about. It's an allegory of the MCU. The MCU has always wanted to speak to everyone, not make compromises, to please both old fans and new ones. As a result, in recent years, it has become a monster incapable of speaking to anyone. But I think it has to accept all these sides to be reborn, to really start from scratch. And when Peter is its messenger, Brand New Day is its guide. Peter has to accept who he is and understand that bringing MJ back will only repeat the cycle, putting her in danger again and again. And I think he'll choose to let her go at the end of the movie, to mourn who he was, the young neighborhood spider, to become Peter Parker, the Spider-Man. But what will happen to Ned? Because even if Peter lets MJ go, it's possible that Ned will never let go of his obsession. And in the future, he might become what he promised Peter he would never become, his nemesis. But that's for another episode. Alright, there you go, friends. We didn't just study this trailer, we explored everything on my mind for weeks. Not just the theory, but what I really think the movie is, what it's trying to tell us, that the MCU is back. But be careful, not in its old form, no, more like accepting to leave the past behind, accepting to start over. And I'll tell you, I've never been so happy to write a video, because deep down, I believe in it, and I fundamentally believe in this movie. The question is whether this rebirth will come through Peter's death. Based on feedback from friends and family test screenings, the movie's ending is very divisive. And for me, there are two options. The first will be Peter's death and his possible resurrection in Secret Wars alongside Jean, probably with the symbiote suit. The second one is the arrest of Jean, Peter and Bruce by the Dio God from here and their imprisonment in the raft, which will be the link between Doomsday and Battleworld. Whatever happens, I think this is the first time for me that there are so few clues about how a Marvel movie is really going to unfold, and I really hope it stays that way. That this rumor about the movie leak is false, and that together we would all discover the truth as fans. If you like this and are new here, feel free to subscribe. It's free. I'll share one of my latest favorite theories for you to enjoy. We'll see each other next Sunday at 6:30 p.m. for a new video. Until then, stay curious. That's the secret to happiness. Ciao.